Finance and Operations at Simetric. Previously, he was the Director of Digital Transformation at Transforming Age. He's also a founder of datadual.co, where he writes about data visualization and analytics. And he is going to talk to us about data to dashboard today. So thank you so much for joining us, Jacob. Just so everyone knows, the talk will be recorded, and we're going to start that in just a moment. If you want to share your screen, Jacob.
Okay, let me get this set up. Give me 1 second here. Okay, will it let me share screen, desktop one. Let's see here. I think I have to share the screen, and then I have to start my presentation. And yes, right?
It's good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so hey everybody, I'm Jacob, and I'm here just to chat about data ask to dashboard. Seems simple, but it's not. And so what I want to share with you all today is, hang on, let me just move this little window. There we go. What I want to share a bit of what I've learned over the last few years of my career, and hope you find this journey interesting. In some ways, this is really what I wish someone had told me when I started getting into data analytics. If I can click the right spot, maybe my slides will go to the next slide. There we go. All right. So a little bit about me. So my background is actually pretty boring, accounting and computer science. It probably makes sense that I, shifted into data, given that context. But I'll tell the story about how I ended up there. So I was actually at a pretty quickly growing consumer products company. I think I actually have a couple of them behind me. It was a company called Funko. And having accurate reporting and analytics for our products that were currently in development was critical. So it was really the tip of the spear for revenue forecasting, partner management, and factory planning. And the underlying system that we were using for project management wasn't really built to provide that type of information. Thankfully, one of the other guys on my team had integrated the API that they had into our SQL data warehouse. So, me being a pretty excellent Excel user, built my proof of concept in Excel, totally awesome. So now I begin to, this process of landing this report with the end users. And I ran into a problem, which was I had more than 1 million rows in my data. So I couldn't use Excel anymore, right? So that was the day I was like, well, it's time to go to SQL. I have to do that. But through that process, it became really obvious to me that the types of problems I was interested in solving would require me to upgrade my tools. So currently today, what I'm using kind of on a daily basis is SQL Server, dbt, and Power BI. Also a little bit of Excel in there. You can't get away from it, unfortunately. And then I'll call out Snowflake and Fivetran here as well. I do use those, on the consulting side. So one thing I'll call out actually, and we were talking about this kind of in the pre-meeting, is a lot of times when I'm doing consulting, it's really setting up what I would call like a one-person data stack. And when I'm doing that, I'm using typically Fivetran, Snowflake, and dbt, and whatever Viz tool that the client is comfortable with, right? If it's Microsoft, we're going to use Power BI. If it's Google, they're going to use Looker. If they're a dev shop, they're not using me because they already have their own stack. That's where you'll see things like Metabase or whatever else come into play, right? While we're talking about tools, and one thing that I see, when I'm talking with new grads, is there's a lot of frustration on, hey, I want to use this tool, like I know it really well. What I would say is, like, keep an open mind. Like, most cloud data warehouses, they're going to do what you need. Most visualization tools are going to do what you need. The parts in between, data replication, workflow automation, source control, all that stuff, that's going to depend on decisions that are made outside of your sphere of influence. So if you can come with open mind, the most impactful skill that you'll bring as a data person is the ability to think critically about data, right? You don't need a tool to do that. That being said, talking about tools, please don't use SQL Server for data analysis. Don't do it. There's so much better options. Use Snowflake or BigQuery. You will thank me for not using SQL Server. It works fine. I know it really well, but don't do that. All right. So let's get into it, right? It's hard to make great dashboards. Why? Two things: context and technical proficiency. There's always a big gulf between business teams and data teams, especially on the more junior side for both, to be honest, right? The business teams, they understand their problem intimately and they know the solution. They're going to bring you a solution. They have limited understanding of what data is actually there. They really don't know. On the other hand, the data team doesn't really know the problem, right? And you have a strong understanding of your data tooling and hopefully your data environment, but maybe not, depending on how new the problem is. So I'm going to show you an example of what the kind of requirements that you can get. So this is literally like a real life example. Client tells me they want a churn model, right? Actually, this was when I was working internally. Thank God it wasn't a client, but this is the conversation, right? So I'm the dutiful analyst. I say, great, let me build a model for you. I get into my dev environment, I write a few queries, I connect it to my Viz tool, start building the data set out. Some time passes, a lot more time passes, but I deliver a churn model. It shows customer churn, and my code was so good. Like, you should have seen this code. It was awesome, right? And so the client opens it and they say, hey, how does this churn change when you consider which website a customer came from? And I looked at them and I said, well, I don't know that answer. I didn't consider that dimension in my model. So I went back to my code, wrote more code, and then the cycle repeats and years pass and I've only ever shipped one model, right? This is what can happen. I want to help you all avoid that trap. Don't do this, right? Don't go dark while you're coding a solution to what you think the problem is. Fall in love with the problem. So I'm going to share 3 simple words with you that have been super impactful for me. And that's write code last, right? For me, this is a hard-earned lesson. When all you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail. Every instinct that I have drives me to start framing out solutions in code. Every time I start with code, I'm back on the whiteboard within an hour after closing the lid of my laptop in frustration. Or worse, I've shipped the wrong thing. So put the keyboard down, get out a pencil and a notebook. We don't need to be fancy. With a pencil, we can build a bridge between stakeholder and data. So I have 4 things that I want to share with you, a loose framework that I've been using now for a couple years. It comes a bit from my own experience, from some internal processes at some consulting companies I've partnered with, and broadly kind of taking a design thinking aspect to this. So the first one is reframe the request as a question. The second is answer with wireframes. The third is sketch flat tables and data relationships. And lastly, check in and show your work. Okay, so let's start with reframing the ask, right? So the first thing we want to do here is bring empathy into the equation. Our stakeholders' pain needs to be our pain. So a lot of times what will happen is a stakeholder will say something like, oh, I just need like the data around X, whatever that thing is. I just like, show me the data, right? One thing that I find helps in that scenario is using the phrase so that I can, right? So that I can do something, right? What am I trying to do? I want to lead my stakeholder into what is the impact, the business impact of what you're trying to get to. The next thing I'm thinking about, more on empathy, getting to a shared why. What questions would we ask of the data if we had this problem, right? What decisions will this data inform? I want to shift the conversation away from outcomes, a dashboard, like, hey, I need a sales dashboard, to actions. What makes this actionable, right? Those actions are going to be durable. The dashboard is just going to answer the problem today. Another thing is, seek to gain context as quickly as possible, right? These folks typically are going to have a lot of pretty deep experience in the domain and are going to be assuming a lot of things about the problem that you don't know the answer to. So don't be afraid to sound dumb. Hey, help me understand. I think I'm being dense here. Give the stakeholder space to educate you, right? They know the problem super well. We want to make sure that we can get to a set of impactful questions that we can then attempt to answer. So let me give you an example. So this is a real life example from one of my clients. So the CEO of this small retail chain said to me, hey, I need a sales dashboard. So my immediate reaction was, I was like, okay, help me understand. You need a sales dashboard so that you can, and she immediately was just like, all right, let me tell you more about that, right? She said, I'm concerned about maintaining gross margin while we add more customers. As it turns out, the industry that she's in, it's a price game. So she rightly identified, hey, I need to make sure that as I'm growing, I'm not growing at the expense of my margin. She wanted a dashboard with eyes on growth while keeping a close understanding of the impact of margin. And that was enough to kind of start. So from there, once you have that context, it turns into a critical thinking exercise, right? Yeah, sorry, I just got lost there. So we want to break this requirement down into components, right? Number one driver of revenue for this company is customers, right? How many customers are we adding and losing over time? Then, of course, we want to turn those customers into dollars. We want to monetize them. How much customer spending goes to margin? If a customer spends $100, how much is the margin? And then we want to pull a little bit more on the thread. What is the cadence of the customer spending? How often are customers visiting our store? And lastly, one metric that came out of a deeper conversation around tracking more information about these customer behaviors was this customer or this company was really interested on driving more customers into their loyalty program. So we threw that on there too. So these are all questions that now I can build chartable answers to, right? I can answer these questions with charts. As an aside, one thing that I kind of like to do when I'm exploring this type of stuff is getting into the Google search and searching around for some of these terms like sales dashboard, but not to use the visuals that are in there, but to really kind of reframe it into what questions is this visual answering, right? When I'm looking at this sales dashboard that someone else built, what questions can I answer with this dashboard, right? And then say, okay, are my questions the same questions? Are they better questions? Are they worse questions, right? And validate my own way of thinking that way. Okay, so next step is answer with wireframes, right? So now that we have the questions, we can answer with these wireframes. Your drawings, they can be low fidelity, right? Here are my questions, here are my wireframes, question, answer. Here's a real life example of the one that I built out in this case. You probably can't read my handwriting, by the way. I guess I should have been a doctor, whatever. So I'll call out a few notes here. It's simple, right? It's opinionated. I'm taking a position on what you think is important. I'm not asking you what's important. I'm taking a position, right? I'm using obvious color choices. Green, red, by the way, not the best for accessibility. So, consider that depending on your audience. That what you want to make sure is that, as this lands in your audience, that everyone who needs to consume it can. So again, green, red, not a great example, but that's what I have. I have some consideration here for grain, right? I'm thinking about in the upper right of that little sketch, like store and product type. I want to slice it by those dimensions. And then lastly, kind of just consider where the eye will get drawn, first, right? Because, we read from left to right, top down. I'm going to put the most important dashboard in the top left, which is where market share is sitting, right? That's the number one they care about. Out of the total market, how much am I taking, right? A little more on this chart design. I'm sure you all are probably pretty well educated on here, but I'll kind of explain my reasoning. I'm using line charts because they're showing trends over time, and I also am clearly labeling, kind of only the last month, which is, I don't know if you can actually see it on here. Yeah, you can. Okay. You can see my mouse. Like right here, I'm just saying, hey, we're plus X, we're plus Z, right, on this against our target. These are like my intentional design choices that may or may not make it into the final version. It's just a sketch, right? Oh yeah, also there's another little thing here. I'm considering, when we're talking about spending by customer by month, what's my cohorts, right? When customers joined, maybe we want to slice there too. So I'm just kind of putting words on paper here. I like to take kind of a blue sky approach to these questions. I may not actually know how to make this look like this in my Viz tool, but that's fine, right? I want to kind of get everything that's possible and get to an answer of like, hey, this is the way that I can drive into this action for my customer. All right. Where did my mouse go? There it is. All right. So the next step is sketching flat tables and data relationships, right? So you want to think about what the underlying tables will look like to drive your charts, and then what the underlying data set looks like in your database. So I just do a little map here. Excuse me. So here, again, you probably can't read my handwriting, but I'm just kind of thinking about, hey, here's like the columns that I need in each of these tables, and then here's relationships where these things are going to come from. So I'm contemplating grain here more specifically, right? Dates, business division, departments, product lines, brainstorming how these answer my questions, right? From time to time, it depends on how familiar I am with the underlying data, but I can spend quite a bit of time, exploring my data at this point, right? I've kind of made a visual that I think would look good, but I'm not really sure what I have, right? Frequently when I'm consulting, I'm building kind of like dashboard zero. So this process actually is my sales process, what I'm showing you right here, right? This is what I'm doing to bring it in to kind of bring the clients along. There's no data pipeline, there's no data warehouse. So I'm kind of just, conceptually drawing this up. Ultimately going back to source systems, poking around, seeing what's in there and roughing in what I think I can do. I think you can easily spend a lot of time in this space. So you have to kind of be careful to balance it. And in the past, especially, the data engineering pieces are getting more durable every day. But there was definitely a period of time where, for those of you who have had the displeasure of using like SQL bulk inserts to manage your data pipelines, you'll know what I mean. Like a column gets changed and you can't, your pipeline breaks, right? Thankfully, tools like Snowflake, for example, have excellent JSON handling, so you can kind of abstract those types of problems away. But anyways, I'll just tell you, 5 years ago, this kind of simple step here, this was like, months of nasty waterfall project management to try to like get this moving, right? You're trying to like, okay, well, I need a server to hold the data. I need to get a SQL license. I need to get IT to connect it to my network, blah, 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 right? Anyways, much faster now, thank God. All right, so kind of the last step that I've laid out here is really, now we're checking in and showing our work, right? So if you recall, the first slide, hey, there's a gulf between these two groups. What we want to do is build a bridge. So we want to show our stakeholder, hey, we've been thoughtful in crafting our questions, but then also our answers to the questions. And we've also taken the next step of looking down and saying, hey, we think this is possible, right? We're not giving you something that is like, pie in the sky. This is possible. And, what this lets us get to is, trust and empowerment. And why these are important is because, especially for your harder problems, you're going to need time, right? You need this person to know you understand their problem, because a lot of the work that's happening in data science today is pioneering, right? We get requests for things that we don't know if they are possible, right? It is possible that, the analysis that someone wants you to do around the effectiveness of their, digital ads driving to sales conversion is actually, a negative signal. It's like, actually, people who click on ads buy less, right? Like that's like, and then there's also technically, are things possible? We don't have the ability to tie together those elements of the data, right? And then, of course, if you're building a model, any good model can always be improved, right? So you have to manage scope. So you have to gain that trust in that with your stakeholders so that you can take time to deliver something great, right? One thing that I'll call in about scope is one trick I remember reading was when you get good feedback on your model is say, hey, that's a good insight. Let's ship V1 and see if your change increases our accuracy in version 2, right? Give people credit for the idea, but then also say, hey, look, the most important thing that we can do here is ship. And the way that we ship is by managing scope. So let me figure out how to get that data in there later. Okay, so now that we're here, right, it's time for us to write code. That's all I got. Thanks, everybody.
Jacob, thank you so much for speaking in terms I could understand. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and that's always my worry. It's like, oh no, is this going to be way over my head? It was not. Thank you so much. I took a lot of notes, and I'm going to be using this in the future for sure. If people have questions, please have them on the chat. We'll record the first two that we already shared with Jacob, and then we'll jump back to whatever people want to ask. So our first question for you was, what are some books that you recommend everyone reads?
Okay, so I'm super lame. I love reading nonfiction books. And what I'll actually say is, so I've got two, I guess. And but my actual hack, because I'm kind of a little distracted at times, is I'll just do the audiobook. So anyways, but I have two. If I can find my list here, I did take some notes. Okay, the first one is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. This one actually I would read physically. But this one is really, it's kind of one of the core design books typically that people will reference when they're talking about design. What this helped me with is really kind of just adding more empathy for my end user, so I can say, hey, I can create something that you love, right? That it doesn't just answer the question functionally, it also like resonates with you emotionally. And I think building that gap just, makes you just that much better at the work that you're doing. The second one is Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, which is a book about negotiation. But really what I love about it, it's really about communication in high stakes situations, right? And a lot of times, actually, I'll leave that for the second question. We'll get to that.
Perfect. Okay, so then our second question. What are the key aspects of doing data science in industry that students typically don't learn in university?
Okay, so part of why I kind of landed in a more technically from a university side, kind of in the kind of more boring side. So I'm like, I don't like sales. I don't like sales. Well, here's the problem. Once you get to a certain skill level, analytics is 100% a sales job. Okay. What I mean by this is all the interesting work that you want to do that you can see, but no one is telling you to do it. You have to sell someone with sponsoring it. You have to find a way to hunt it. And that is how you get to do really great, fulfilling work. It doesn't get brought to you on a silver platter. You have to sell it. And then by doing great work on things that maybe don't matter so much or aren't as interesting to you, you will make selling something that you really care about that much easier, right? There's an interesting passage in the book, Who is Michael Ovitz, which is Michael Ovitz's memoir about his life as a Hollywood agent. As an agent, he's always trying to maximize income for his clients. So he wouldn't let them take too many personal like indie projects. He would say to them, do this one for me, and then you can do this one for you, right? So he would do that so that he can keep his stars marketable and highly paid, but also let them get the satisfaction from doing their own indie movies, right? I think a lot about this in the work that I do every day, right? Some of this work is for me, but some of it's not for me, right? It's for you, it's for my client, it's for my boss, right? And that's how I kind of balance, a lot of the work that I do is understanding, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And the reason I'm going to do this thing that I don't care about that much, but I'm going to do it great is because then I can do the thing that I really care about and people will sponsor me to do it.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that approach is very common in like the creative industry where you have to, sort of take up the job in which you make an ad for a car company so that you can do your short film. And I think it's sometimes easy to forget that data science is actually really creative, right? We get sort of caught in that this is a technical job. It's actually incredibly creative because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So we have to learn that pitch, and we have to learn how to keep practicing the things that we want to be doing, not just the things that necessarily make us money or are productive. So thank you for that.
100%.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can stop recording.